medium-sized banks in Latin America, they're like ripe for targeting.
Hello, everyone, and help me welcome Alfred to the Digital Shift. It is so great to have you here. For everyone listening, Alfred Ortiz is with CSD Cyber, which is a cybersecurity firm that helps businesses proactively defend against today's constantly evolving threats. They focus on building secure infrastructures, compliance readiness, and continuous defense strategies that protect organizations from cyber risks. Alfred has been instrumental in guiding organizations across industries to strengthen their security posture and adapt to a modern digital landscape. For those of you that are new to the show, we do podcasts with leaders in the industry for both cybersecurity and technology, where we explore how leaders like Alfred are navigating technology, going through business transformations, and focusing on the current state of what's going on in the industry, plus looking into the future of everything going on. So your insights today are going to be very valuable to our listeners. So Alfred, I hope that introduction represented you well enough. Welcome to the show. Let's start off with a simple question of let us know where you're calling in from, as well as a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Darren. Thanks for having me. So, calling in from Colorado Springs. So, if you know Colorado Springs, it's the home to Pikes Peak and also 5 military bases. So, cybersecurity is right on the forefront of what we do at CSD Cyber and what we're looking at. So, with my background, I've been in business with CSD Cyber since about 2018. So, right before COVID hit. So, things have changed dramatically since then. We've looked at everything from, the basics of helping people get set up on, multi-factor authentication, password changes, all the basics for small business, all the way up to, looking at big companies, Fortune 50 companies that handle military contracts and securing their environments. So with regard to the business, we've seen a lot of it out there, and including that, for example, wireless technology, other things like that we've gotten our hands into. My background, just education-wise, undergraduate from Cal Poly, MBA Texas, master's degree from IE Business School, and finishing up a doctorate in data breaches and information systems at IE Business School in Spain, Madrid. So with respect to that, we've seen a lot of what the industry's doing, what's out there, and how the world's changing with regard to cybersecurity. We've seen a lot of things going from nation state actors trying to get involved with stuff, and maybe getting their hands in our cookie jars, if you will, all the way to, script kiddies that are, looking at, just playing around and seeing how far they can get with regard to certain things around the environment, security environment. So that's a little bit of background with regard to me and kind of what we look at, Darren. Working with some of the companies, we work with a lot of cities and municipalities, and there's certainly, from the perspective of that security measures, a lot of cities aren't ready. We're finding that they don't understand the true need. We had one municipality that was super safe. We worked with them. We did a lot of things, everything from physical to technical testing, talking to them about what they need to, where their weaknesses might be after an evaluation. And right next door, literally next door to that town, was another town that got hacked. FBI was there for a good 6 months, finding out what happened. And so we can see that there's night and day difference, and really it's a priority of those municipalities. The federal government does a pretty good job of things, albeit there are some gaps there too that we've seen, but the state and local governments, one big example of this is the state of Nevada that just got hacked and data breached just a few weeks ago. Most of them don't know it until it's already too late. I mean, you go by the IBM numbers, and it takes 9 months, 270 days before you even know anything's actually happened. And so when you go through that, and there's billions of dollars that are at risk here, people's personal identifiable information that's at risk, a lot of these things can affect the way that things are happening in cyberspace, what is a company going to do all the way from physical security to protecting the data, whether it be HIPAA, whether it be military, whether it be or national security type of data that we need to worry about as a government here in the US. So those are just some of the things we touch on, Darren. But if there's anything else like expanding into a certain elm, we can get into that too. I did want to mention before we move on, though, I'm a professor at University of Colorado, Denver. And one of the things that I do that maybe separates me a little bit from the pack is there's tons of practitioners, and these guys are awesome to work with. A lot of the folks out there are just super, super individuals working around cyber. One of the things from the academic perspective is we look for patterns in this area. We look from a very strong framework or methodology that we go into to hyper scrutinize what we get into before we put our findings out there. And I have tons of people that are looking at my work academically to make sure that number one, it fits frameworks, and number two, does it have that rigor academically that we can publish some of this stuff. And I did some of this a paper back in August of last year that was presented at what's called AMSIS, the American Information Systems Conference of Academics, around personal identifiable information and communications of data breaches in the 50 states here in the US. So that was something that we looked at, and some interesting findings that we can get into a little bit later in our conversation.
Absolutely. And I think that was a heck of an introduction, especially because there's not too many doctorates that come onto the program. A lot of them are industry experts, hands-on. So when you talk about your thesis for your PhD, can you expand on that a little bit at what exactly you're going for and what you're going to try to publish?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that's pretty unique about this doctorate that I'm in, number one, it's in Europe and Spain specifically. Number two, it's a DBA, so it's a Doctor of Business Administration, which really means that I'm putting together, I'm trying to be what's called ambidextrous in the field. I'm trying to use what I've had as a practitioner in IT and IS for 20 plus years. And on the other hand, I'm trying to put that amongst the rigor academically of how I'm going to go research this, the fundamentals of research theory, putting it together. A lot of people see and maybe read an academic paper before they go to bed because it'll put the lights out on them, right? But when you look at these papers, it's not really just a matter of grabbing one or two of them and then making your whole decision based off of this. When you're looking at it from an academic perspective, it's grabbing a whole bunch of different areas and maybe getting a paragraph here or a paragraph there of somebody that's done some contributed to the literature in that area academically. So it's important to know that, yeah, some of this stuff can be a little bit dry from an academic or practitioner perspective, but when you put it up against the rigor and you grab it from a bunch of different areas, you're making a decision based on what's out there. Looking at things from the international perspective makes it interesting as well, because when you look at the world, we focus here in the United States with regard to NIST security. And so those frameworks that the National Institute has put together. But when you look at other parts of the world, parts of Europe, parts of Asia, they start going down the ISO 27000X frameworks. So my look at the world from that perspective is to be ambidextrous in both worlds and to kind of put that Venn diagram together where I have that specialty in the middle, right? So playing in there, looking at these two worlds and putting it up against the rigors, what's important. Looking at the international perspective, when you do that, the NIST and ISO frameworks were a cornerstone of what I did. But then we launch into other areas like communication of a data breach. So we saw a lot of, in this paper that I had mentioned around communication of data breaches, we see the communication part of the NIST framework and how people are responding, right? Which typically there's a couple different ways they'll respond. They'll deny it. They'll ask for a scapegoat, different they'll use different types of thinking or responses based on what happens. And they'll also give what are called rewards. So they'll give, if you do get your data breached, 12 to 24 months of identity or theft protection. They'll apologize for what happened, et cetera, right? So that theory of how they communicate brings about what we see in those patterns of data breaches and so forth. And then from there, you can start concentrating as an organization in those areas based on what you found in the patterns that you see. So that's a little bit of the academic side.
That's really cool. And if you're willing to share any of those papers that you have already out there or books, I'll be happy to include them in the description below. So let's go ahead and now focus on CSD Cyber. So
Sure.
walk me through your role and how it connects to the bigger mission of the company.
Yeah. So when we got started, like any business, it's not, a straight line from A to B to get to where you need to be. So we took a lot of things, and with the world of cyber, everything's changing. Every hack, every malware attack, everything is kind of a black swan, if you will. When somebody gets in, somebody gets patched, now the bad guys find a new way to get in. So when we see that, I volunteer at the local small business development SBDC here in Colorado and Colorado Springs, and I help small businesses. So we were helping small businesses at first, especially with COVID that kicked in, and how to keep their data safe. But then we looked at medium and large companies that we can provide remediation solutions, because they typically have people that are already working on staff, right? So they're going to have staff. So how do we complement what it is that they're already doing with what they need to do? So we look at endpoint security, we look at wireless, we look at their networks. When we go in and we start looking at this, we start qualifying our clients to say, let us go in, and I was joking around with a customer because he was paying partially with a credit card, and I said, this is the least invasive thing that we're going to do to your firm when you give me that credit card number. We're going to go in and we're going to check your network. We're going to go in at different levels. So when we go in, we can do this black box test where we're just checking IP addresses. Maybe we'll go in and start looking at some IP addresses. We'll look at some of the social aspects of some of the people that actually work there. So maybe some of the engineers and their backgrounds. And then depending on the organization, we'll do some physical tests. But when we go in, we'll do a couple days of work on that. We'll ping everything. We'll see how secure it is in those environments and see if those places that we can maybe get an itch into to try to get in. A lot of our work is kind of in that gray area between the black box testing that I just mentioned and white box testing, where we have full or access to everything, right? What we'll do is we'll go in with low level type of access. Let's say a custodian at a particular facility, and you should only have in your organization levels of access to do your job. So a custodian shouldn't have access to go in to see the financial statements of the firm before they're published to the SEC, right? So when we go in, we'll find out where the network is. We'll find out how fast we can get in, where we can get in from, and we'll kind of use that that flank, if you will, on the outside to see what the perimeter is on the low-level access and try to get in. We can get technical if we're on site. We can do wireless. Right? I mean, we can just sit out in the parking lot and see how far we can get with stuff, which is always fun. Walk around and literally just walk into a building, which, you take the CISO exam. It's one of the first questions on the test, right? That you should be concerned about is the physical security. So some folks, they just leave their doors open. And, a few weeks ago, I was at a location. I walked right into the conference room of the facility. So with that being said, those are a few things that we can do on an initial basis. And then once we've determined where those weak points are, then we can kind of keep moving. I have some other examples I'd be glad to share as we talk. Sure. That's just an intro.
So would you say that the physical security is the most lacking in most companies?
I think it's more of an oversight from people that they take a little bit for granted, right? That when somebody goes in and we just follow right behind and somebody's pretending to have a smoke break or whatever outside, then I just walk in, right? I'll make some fake credentials, go right in, act as a consultant. Of course, I have a get out of jail free card in my pocket, but nevertheless, talking to folks and some of them, because training has been more relevant in a lot of organizations and they know this stuff, some catch on a lot quicker than others. But some folks are so heads down in their work, that's not their core competency of their job. Their focus is to worry about their job, whether it's engineering, whether it's finance, whatever it is. They're not worried about security as much, but they know, hey, I've got to go take the quiz for the phishing, right? I've got to make sure that the doors close behind me, et cetera, et cetera. And so what we try to do is we just poke in those particular areas. Some of it can be physical. We always find a place that is the weakest point. E-cigarettes plugged into a USB, iPhones connected to a laptop at a bank. All of those different things that don't have security necessarily on the device are getting connected to some areas like e-cigarette inside of a robot, a welding robot at a facility. That's the weakest link right there, right? And whether people know it or not, that device is showing up on the network if you're doing an analysis. So there's a lot of ways to do this. I'll give you an example of one municipality we worked with. What was really interesting is we went in, wrote some short script in about 20 minutes. We went in from the public library, which the town is in charge of, and went straight into the water system. So in working with the engineer, one of the things that we found is, do you want me to spin the turbines until they break? Do you want me to shut them off, or do you want me to mix the drinking and wastewater? And I said, don't touch another key on the keyboard. Let's call the CIO and let him know what's going on. As we delved into that more and more, of course, municipalities don't hire, for example, necessarily or directly, maybe a civil engineer will take care of the infrastructure, but they'll sub out the IT staff and put them in charge and say, hey, follow our instructions with regard to the what we've done in the past with other organizations. And so as we went in and we found out more and more, there were about 5 or 6 consultants working on this project about 5 or 6 years ago, actually, and they still had full admin access to the environment, which shouldn't be happening, right? But we found this out, and we told the client, hey, listen, you guys got to lock these folks down and then reissue some credentials if they come back to work for you.
Well, and first off, I'd like to thank you for not mixing the sewage water and our drinking water together, because that would be a real life disaster recovery moment. And then also, I'm not sure I've ever heard of an e-cig in a robot. So that's a new take on a way to hack in. So that's really cool. So let's shift over into industry trends then. Everything in cybersecurity is shifting so quickly. So what are the major trends and shifts that you're seeing from your viewpoint at CSD Cyber?
Yeah, I mean, just some of the basic stuff that we're looking at, like even your phishing and your vishing and all of these things are getting better and better by the bad guys, right? Even the little things. I mean, all of us are getting this stuff on our phone and getting stuff on our email and things like that, and they're looking pretty real. So as we get more and more and we start seeing this, we can also see it with regard to some of our AI and some of our what we're doing on virtual, or I shouldn't say virtual reality, but rather looking at our social media. So when we're putting videos out there, and this is actually happened, and I wasn't directly involved, but talking to some folks, this one gentleman had his business up on Facebook where he was doing some business consulting. He got hacked on his Facebook. His videos were hacked by the bad guys, and they put everything together inside of an AI platform. So they recreated all of his voice and his images, and they locked him out of his Facebook, went back to his client base after they had redone a thing and said, we're going to be doing some consulting. It's only going to be X hundreds of dollars. All of his clients, or not all of them, but some of his clients actually paid everything into the credit card, and they got duped, for lack of a better word, and thousands of dollars in reputation got hurt. So that's a small business instance. When you're looking at some of the bigger firms that you're looking at, it can be a multitude of things. We worked with one where um, the trend was, hey, we're in the system, but what are we looking for and how are we going to ping things? AI is just going more and more. I've been reading some academic research, and ironically enough, because there's not a lot of folks going into academia as much anymore, a lot of these publications are actually coming from other parts of the world now, which is interesting, right? Because we typically have homegrown academics, but now that knowledge base is gone out to the rest of the world. And when we see these trends, we have to start thinking about the future of AI and how the bad guys are going to respond to this. Because now what they can start doing is they can start going into the logs. And as the tools are working, start looking for those patterns that are coming through internally. So if they're inside, then they can almost make the next move later on. So it's like a chess piece where you're actually looking and finding the patterns where AI is going to say, "Hey, listen, this guy's going to move his chessboard this way to try to defend himself. So we're gonna try these other methods." So now we start looking at AI in a academic sense that, hey, people are starting to talk about this, but we're applying the practical applications of this. You don't necessarily need to worry about the paper I was looking at measured how many logs were in there. They interviewed some people at firms about this, and they were looking at doing a write-up on what they found on past literature. So when we put these together and we see these patterns, you know that AI is going to kick in. And we haven't even started about quantum. That's a whole other, you know, framework and futuristic kind of thing that, I think in our lifetimes we might see.
Well, I think when it comes to that, obviously social media is becoming a big part of branding for a company, whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, doesn't really matter where. But for those even executive level people that are putting their faces out there, and that example that you gave, how are people able to protect themselves and their company when they have to be the face of their businesses? And even though they're real, just like you said, with AI and everything else, you only need a couple of videos to be able to immediately dupe them and start
Yeah.
having someone else maliciously represent you.
Yeah. So I think, a lot of people are talking about this, right? So when we go in and when we have the what's the gosh, I'm trying to think of the word that I lost the word. It was on the tip of my tongue. But when we go and we lock down, we can see about encryption that we're going to start doing probably pretty soon on some of this stuff. We start looking at water tag or tagging, to see if it's legit. So when we start looking at some of these options, there are ways to do that, but it's not just small companies, right? It's not just when we look at this, now we can go and we can try to engineer the person. What are we've done this in the past. Well, we found out what this dude's password was in Facebook. Is it going to be something similar in LinkedIn? So now we can start going down that road if there's money, right? And it's that's part of it, right? It's the people, but there's other things in some of my research that I was finding from last year that I published in my work, and I'll definitely share a copy. When you do this, you can also look, for example, at third parties. So what we found, and I went to mostly universities that we looked at data breaches, but one of the things was it was a top level university and they had their donor list in a third party application that was in the cloud. So somehow they went through the university and they got the data from the donors and then started going after them. They're not necessarily worried about my research, Darren. They're worried about getting the data, the bad guys, to be able to sell it on the dark web. So when we look at these things and these data breaches, we have to start thinking about what the future is going to hold with this AI, how we're going to lock it down, watermarks, encryption, things of that nature. And it's unfortunately going to be a bigger burden on an entrepreneur or business to lock that down. And the sensitivity of the business, it's the old saying, every business is a technology business. Well, every node, every laptop, every switch, everything that we have out there is a potential way in. That e-cigarette, that we set it on the robot. Well, that e-cigarette could be a person that, has a password that's out there they can try to log in.
So when you're taking those examples of the attack vectors along with artificial intelligence, how is CSD Cyber actually using that? And like, I guess a better way to word that is how are these trends impacting your business and growth strategy for your company?
Yeah. So one of the things that we're looking at when you start getting into the federal government level is by this year, you're supposed to be post-quantum ready, right? So the encryption levels that you're looking at now are supposed to be able to be secure, that you're looking at some of this stuff, blockchain, other things, other technologies that are going to happen. We need to start thinking about that. And we have some tools that we work with, right? We don't necessarily manufacture all of our software, manufacture all these things, but we have some things that we actually put together where we have IP on wireless technology. So, somebody comes in what they call evil twin attack, replicate the signal to go in when something refreshes, like a router or the modem. We can go in, refresh, and try to get into that network. So how are we locking down that wireless world in our specialty with what we do and train ethical hackers to defend against it? So there's always going to be that physical part of getting into a port and a server or doing something like that. But, we look at the wireless space, a little bit in the telcos. But when you start getting into the heavy duty stuff, we need to start talking and having the conversation about the post-quantum encryption space. I mean, that's going to be, to me at least, that's going to be a world that we need to start thinking about. And in our machines, everything from protecting BIOS, protecting the machine and software, the operating system, and then going into your network with regard to some of the software and hardware, and then analyzing what we can do with AI to either hide what our moves are going to be to defend, right? Just like an army or a military does, and defending against that, and not letting the bad guys see, hey, what are some of the spaces? The other thing too is some of the infrastructure is so old, right? Like sensors for some of the cities on streets and street lights and things of that nature. I mean, some of this stuff hasn't been, updated since the 90s.
And I know this is a dangerous question because we could probably talk about this for hours. You've mentioned quantum multiple times, so let's just keep it at a high level. When you're talking about the post-quantum world, what does that look like in regards to the level of security step up that's required to be able to maintain a secure company?
Yeah, so that's going to be a hard question because I don't know what the future is necessarily going to hold, but I'll try to put it in layman's terms a little bit in the way that I understand it, Darren, is if in today's world you had 1,000 computers and 1,000 people working on trying to decrypt today's best encryption methods, probably take 1,000 years, right? But with quantum, they're trying to figure out the day, or government's trying to figure out the day when it's going to take 15 minutes for a quantum computer to decode everything. And part of the reason why is, if I ask the simple question, what's 2 + 2, we immediately come up with the answer 4, right? Well, a quantum computer is going to answer 2 + 2 in a billion different ways, all at the same time it took us the time to think of the answer 4. Why? Because it says, okay, 4.0, 4.000 to the end of time, but then it starts giving options. It has what's called multiple gates. So the math that it's doing and the physics that's happening to come up with those solutions, one of my favorite books is Machiavelli's The Prince. I mean, it's back from the 16th century, right? So it was written in Old Italian, and I give my students this example over at UC Denver. Should you translate it straight from the Old Italian to modern day English, or should you translate it from, let's say, Old Italian to Old English to modern English? What would be the way that you would translate it? Well, we have to think about that. Quantum's going to translate the book immediately in all of the different formats. So when you think about that, all at the same time, so it has those multiple gates. That's why when they say, oh, it's going to have options with regard to supply chain, like boats that can go everywhere and where the best time is to take off and load up and then deliver the shipments, it can do that all in one shot. So if we imagine, instead of having, oh, well, we can do this one or this one or this one, it's going to say, here's all of them, and here's the order and the ranking that they should be in. So imagine the encryption that it's going to try to go and solve this all at the same time.
Got it. So it's going to become a game of speed in order to stay ahead of everything
Yeah,
because
this
of
is
how fast it
yeah.
can solve it.
Yeah, this is my 2 cents. So AI is the logic kind of behind things, but the quantum's going to kind of be the processing point that it can do it. And we can see in today's world, our laptops and our home computers aren't going to be the places that we're going to process this data anymore. It's going to have to be somewhere that has the power to be able to do it. And then our machines will get that to be able to put it up on the screen so the human understands what we're doing.
Awesome. I think that's a great example, especially when you hear the advertisements for buying a computer, right? It has a quantum processor or, the latest i11. So let's turn our focus now to CSD Cyber. When you look
Sure.
at that company or as your company itself, what is currently working really well for CSD right now?
Yeah. So for lack of a better word, and I did a lot of marketing and sales when I in my previous life is looking at the low hanging fruit, right? The one thing that I want to see is I want to see cities and local governments, everything from states and municipalities, counties, etc. I want to see them get safe, right? I know Atlanta had a huge hack a couple of years ago. Nevada just had theirs, and I think I understand that there's federal mandates to keep this data safe, but we also need to look at the cities. And I think this is a key factor for us that we all live somewhere. And, it goes back to the old saying, all politics is local. Well, I think all cyber should be local, right? Because when we look at this, we need to say how we're going to keep our little community safe, right? I don't want the water getting tainted that I drink, right? I don't want the electricity getting shut off. And I gave a guest lecture at the Complutense University in Madrid to a bunch of international relations students, right, a few months ago. And my first question to them after introducing myself was, what are you going to do in 10 or 15 years when all of the streetlights and you're in a power of some position of power in your government and all the streetlights in Madrid turn green? How are you going to respond to that? So from our perspective, when we see this, CSD is looking at cities, we're looking at hospitals, we're looking at these medium-sized areas that we can help, and we've had a lot of experience because we see what the trends are to help these folks, and we go in and we help them with the things that they need help with the most. So if we see a gaping hole in their cybersecurity plan, we're going to go in and try to fill the gap. Hey, here's the best way to do it. Our job isn't to get involved with their third-party suppliers, right? Whether it be somebody that's providing their laptops or switches or what they're part of their physical network. Our job is to say, hey, I walked into your building on a Sunday night with no problem. I could have, taken out your network. Or on the other hand, when we do go in, we're pulsating very slowly in your network or very loudly, and your switches and routers didn't do anything. So what we do is we say, put the stop gaps, make sure that you lock down the things that need locking down immediately, just like that water situation that I gave you. And then we say, okay, take care of that first, and then we'll come back to you and finish our assessment of what you're needed to do.
And so a question I think is interesting is the niche that you focused on. So you talk about hospitals and municipalities. Why focus on those two specifically?
Yeah. So here's what I say is number one, I think a lot of the people in local government, especially the executives, and when I say that, city council members, etc., and some of the staff don't realize that importance. They see cybersecurity as part of IT, which I think it's two different worlds. And they need to do a couple of things. Is number one, understand the reality of it, get trained up on it as city leaders, and then be able to budget for it and to put some of the resources into it with a good team that not only understands, hey, I'm going to go put audio visual and some other stuff, but we need to lock down what we do. Quick example of that, We went in and they had on the wireless network, they had the drapes or the curtains. What do you call it? The plastic drapes. But they went in and we got onto the network because these guys had automatic drapes that would close on the wireless network. So we found out what they were, and then we went in through there. So they need to understand this stuff. The other thing with big companies, sometimes, and it goes for all of us, right? And medical, especially because some of the medicals are big, and a lot of medicals are getting, the little companies are getting eaten up by the big companies. So these medical firms are starting to become conglomerates. Well, number one, they're trying to put two networks together that maybe don't fuse right away. And number two, they may have some horse blinders on in the sense that they're knee deep in what they're doing, but sometimes it's good to have an assessment of what it is that they're doing from a third party, because number one, it brings credibility. And number two, you get to step away for a minute and say, hey, let somebody else look at this from a either 30,000 foot perspective or in the weeds and let us know what you guys found.
Gotcha. I appreciate that clarification. So, and I do think that's one of those things where when you're especially talking about smaller companies, they can't afford even a CTO sometimes or a CISO.
Sure.
So they're not focused on security. They're just trying to put food on the table. So those
Exactly.
were all the good things that are happening at CSD. So what have been the most frustrating? What are the obstacles that you've been trying to overcome?
Yeah, so time frame wise, right? In terms of making a decision, like some of the cities, um, I'll give you an example. It's kind of that old saying there you get three options: fast, cheap, or quality, right? So pick two. So a lot of these folks, um, they'll get something on the cheap, like for example, in California. California has a law that's called AB 2135. And that law basically states that if you're connected to some third-party server or outside of your network that you're connected to, you have to have a pen test every 2 years. So what people will do, and what organizations, cities, some hospitals, hospitals are a little bit more afraid because of all the HIPAA requirements and the privacy, and they kind of took care of that. But what happens in these things is they'll see something that's free, like a free CISA um, pen test, and what they'll see is they'll get that, and they'll say, well, we don't need you now. We got this piece of paper that CISA says that they did a free pen test, and I said that's fine, but what was the quality of it? And so, you get something for free, but is there quality and cost in what you did? So what are cities more concerned about? They're more concerned about budget than they are security, because they have a whole load of cybersecurity insurance, and they have a piece of paper that got them out of jail because they got the free pen test. And they say, look, well, we got this. If we get sued, then the insurance will cover that. And over here, we got the free pen test. So we fulfilled our obligations as a town. And so that can be a little bit frustrating.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to government, they're on very strict budgets that don't move once that money's run out. But to your point, they've got to protect themselves legally. So when it comes to that sort of timeline, when you work with them, obviously, and they also may not know, right? Like they're not security experts. So they're like, oh, cool, they checked the box of the pen test and they assume just because they got, 20 tests back that it was this massive solution where to the examples you've given, from the human hacking, in person, physical, uh, laptops, all these different areas, their Wi-Fi, they're not going to know any of that because they just are not educated in it. So when
Right.
you're looking at your company's growth and trying to get into more of these municipalities, what are those metrics that you're most focused on improving?
Yeah. So again, it goes more to client need, right? So when we stopgap this, there's three ways an organization can survive, right? If it's going and gets a cut, you put a Band-Aid on it. If it gets knocked out, you tend to them until they come back from being unconscious, right? Like I play rugby and sometimes, people get hit pretty hard. So they come back. But if somebody's bleeding out, you got to take them emergency room, right? So we can use this from that perspective, from an organizational perspective. If we see something that part of the organization's bleeding out from a cyber perspective, we got to do something now. You can't wait. You better get some emergency budget and go straight to your executives to take care of this. If there's a pretty good situation where they get knocked out, but hey, our water system could get hacked. Let's take care of that now. You'll be okay, but let's put some ice on this and wake the guy up. And then lastly, hey, things were pretty good, but we found out your telephone system in the organization's a little weak, or you guys need some training. When I go in, I'll actually ask somebody to say, hey, can you walk me through just real quick your service management software? And they're like, well, who are you? Oh, I'm a consultant. They'll show my badge. And I said, can you do me a favor and take a screenshot and send it to your CIO? And they'll do it. And I tell them, well, in my reports, hey, listen, by the way, you just got this, and somebody's doing that. The one thing I did want to mention, Darren, that's going back to the last point of what's a little frustrating, is the reporting generated by some folks that do pen tests. What we do is we try to customize it to these things I just mentioned where they need the most help. But some folks will just run out of the box pen test, get a 500-page piece of a report, and it doesn't go into any specifics. And so have you done the work to get a pen test? Yes. But has it done to the quality of what it is that you're looking for? That's the important thing, and where those priorities lie, and finding out those three areas of, do I need to go to the emergency room? Do I need to put some ice and wake somebody up? Or do I need to put a Band-Aid on this thing? Which is going to be the three.
And I think that's a very important approach. Just like you get triaged in a hospital, like you might be in an emergency room, but unless you look like you're bleeding out, you might be waiting there for hours. So in those examples, to me, it sounds like those are clients you're already working with. But in regards to getting in front of the clients that may be bleeding out, is that something that you use as like a service to be like, hey, like we went by your building and realized that you're entirely encrypted? How are you getting in front of the people that realize that they need it?
Yeah, well, so a lot of it's word of mouth, right? Because, even though we want to put CSD out there, we have to keep a quote unquote low profile. Our job isn't to just blast everything out there, but rather, if we do a good job for somebody, they're going to tell 5 other people. I mean, it goes back to the old ways of doing things. If it takes 10 times more to get a new customer than to keep a current one, right? So what we do is we go talk to the folks at the cities, maybe through some of their trade shows that they have, or city meetings, conferences that they have, and then working with some of the people. And a lot of these people don't necessarily stay at the same city for 20 or 30 years. They move out to other places. So when that happens, we've built our reputation with them, and they come back to us and they say, hey, Al, you did good work for us over at this organization. We want to bring you over here to this one. So when we look at that, we see those trends. And like I said before, I was carrying a bag, literally traveling around the world selling software and services, and people are the same just about everywhere. They want a good product for a decent price, and somebody that's respectful, that they can trust.
When you talk about joining those meetings, I'm assuming they're mostly government sponsored or something like that. What can you walk me through, like what that looks like? Is that something that you're just a part of the group and you get referred to it? Is it something where it's just public and everybody is allowed to come in and you're just representing as the cybersecurity? How does that actually work?
Yeah, so let's say you'll have, I don't know, city governments of a particular state, right? And so they'll have their annual conference. One of the huge ones is MISAC in California. So when you municipality information systems, right, you'll have a lot of the CIOs from towns. You'll have a lot of the staff that's IT. And you just basically give a speech. I gave one to me and one CISO a few years ago. And we basically just said, hey, listen, this is the case study that we used. These are the things that you need to consider. And we're here for your municipality, right? You guys all have a lot of the same problems, and you're in this room because you're concerned in the first place. So we'll give you a case study of what we did. Obviously, we're not going to, do anything that would give out any sensitive information. But when we do go out there, then they see us, and that we have immediate reference and immediate what's the word, reputation by having a former customer and me give the speech or give the presentation or case study to those people that are there. So we got to build that up, and it goes back all the way to what I told you earlier. I told that customer, getting your credit card information is going to be the least invasive thing we're going to do to you.
Right.
So you got to trust us. I mean, there's no, you have to look at it kind of like, hey, for lack of a better word, dating, because you got to trust the other person.
Right. And a lot of people expect that to happen on the first date, or what they say is get married on that first date. But there's a lot more than one conversation that gets to those solutions and closures. So last question on the subject is just, when you're talking about the goals of CSD, the magic wand question, like, what would you say is the one thing that is slowing CSD down? You kind of mentioned that you can't be that public, even though appreciate you being on the podcast. So for all of you listening, make sure we keep the views low because we're trying to keep them quiet. But at the same time, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a constant learning curve, for lack of a better word. And again, I'm applying my ambidextrous nature of academia and the practitioner side, but we've got to look and assume that everything that we do that every attack or everywhere we look, there's a black swan. It's already been covered, so now we got to start thinking. So what's in our methodology? What's in our strategy? We're looking at AI, right? Just like I give you that example. Hey, how are the bad guys going to use it for the flank to try to get around stuff that's there now? We're looking at the post-quantum encryption, right? We're looking at vendors that we can work with, because it's not just us. It does take a team of people to help an organization. That we're going to look at vendors that we completely trust and work with. We work with some guys that have worked with multinational corporations, and their solution works just as well with some of the smaller firms. So we're gonna use that technology and bring it to part of the organizations that maybe, hey, listen, I don't need a huge, massive enterprise solution, but the parts that they do have, we do need, and it's reasonable with regard to cost, and it fits what we're trying to do to secure our environment. So we're always looking at the future to see what the next, I don't want to say the next best thing, right? But we need to look at the technology and look, how is it going to secure our customers, create, secure, defend, right? Become a trusted advisor for those folks. And then as these things change, go tell them in a public setting like the conferences we were telling you about, and then just saying, hey, listen, these are some of the things that you need to think about, but if you want to implement it, give us a buzz.
Gotcha. So as we wrap up this podcast, do you have any final words of wisdom that you want to tell our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, always be safe, always be a little bit hesitant. Try to learn as much as you can, especially for those firms that their core competency isn't cybersecurity. And remember to make the delineation between cybersecurity and IT, that they go hand in hand, but they're also separate. So when you look at this, know that there's trusted advisors like us that will come in and help you. If we can't do it, we will have somebody come and help us do it for you and bring them in, and you make the ultimate decision for your firm. That's what the executives are for. So we understand the organizational needs, but we also understand the cyber needs and what needs to be prioritized to take care of our customers, to keep them safe, because that's what we're hoping for. And I know that we're going to do our very best to help a customer and do everything we can to make sure that they're safe now and in the immediate future.
Alfred, that was fantastic. I loved it. So thank you so much for the conversation today and for sharing your time and all the insights that you've provided, especially on quantum. That's definitely something that is coming up all the time, and it's going to be very interesting to see where we go from there. For everybody that's listening, if you'd like to learn more about Alfred and his company, CSD Cyber, you are able to check out him and his team by heading over to csdcyber.com. For all of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to The Digital Shift. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure that you click the subscribe button, the like button, and share it with your colleagues so that way we can create more and more great conversations with future leaders that are shaping the future of technology and cybersecurity. Thank you all again. Alfred, thank you so much for calling in today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Darren.
Hey there. It's Darren from The Digital Shift. I wanted to take a moment to thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. If you haven't already, make sure to check out the links in the description to learn even more information of everything we went over today. But if you enjoyed this podcast, then you are absolutely going to love this one. And if you're looking to look deeper into the technology that we go over in these videos, then go ahead and check out this one here. Regardless of which one you pick, you're going to walk away with something new. As always, I'll talk to you in the next one, and keep being awesome.